Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Ingenuity Alumni Event 2020. My name is Aisha Sirop. I'm a Commercialisation Manager for the Faculty of Engineering, Computer and Mathematical Sciences at the University of Adelaide. Ingenuity is an interactive showcase of the university's student projects exploring real-life applications of engineering, computer and mathematical sciences. It is truly an annual flagship event for the faculty and serves as a platform for students to professionally present their work to a wide range of audiences. Unfortunately, the pandemic has put a temporary hold on the face-to-face Ingenuity Showcase for 2020. However, several aspects of Ingenuity have been re-imaged online. So I hope that you have been able to view some of our fantastic projects our students have worked on in the virtual booths throughout the day today. And if not, the online event will remain active until the 27th of November. So this evening event, alumni event, focuses on the future of innovation and commercialisation in South Australia, drawing from experienced local entrepreneurs and state government investment programs. And before we start, I would like to acknowledge the Kaurna people, the original custodians of the Adelaide Plains, and the land on which the University of Adelaide's campuses at North Terrace, Waite and Roseworthy are built. I would now like to welcome our panel members, Dr. Michelle Perugini, co-founder and CEO of Presagen and Life Whisperer, David Rohrsheim, Portfolio Manager of the South Australian Venture Capital Fund, and Grant Tinney, founder of Precise Advanced Manufacturing Group. I will invite each panel member to first tell us a little bit about their organisations and journey in South Australia, after which we will open a Q&A session. But in the meantime, feel free to write your questions using the Q&A tab. So Michelle, I would like to invite you first to tell us a bit about your business and take us through the journey that led you where you are now.
Great, thanks so much, Sharon. Welcome to all the alumni on the call today. So in terms of my journey, I am born and bred South Aussie, and I've now founded two what I would call successful global companies based very much in the deep tech sector that we're expanding, and I'll talk a little bit about those. But my original expertise was in the medical sciences space. So I was a Bachelor of Pharmaceutical and Biotechnology, Medical and Pharmaceutical Biotechnology, and then did my PhD in medicine, spent around 10 years in stem cell biology and genetic space, really as a hardcore scientist, running my own science and research group. And then in 2007, I founded my own AI company, along with my co-founder and partner, Don Perugini, who was ex-defence and had a lot of experience and a PhD in AI and was working on a whole range of military applications in the space. So that was kind of my first, I guess, transition from the pure research and science discipline into commercialisation. A little bit of a trial by fire, but a very interesting learning experience for me, and one that I really loved and grew to kind of expose a whole range of skill sets that made me, capable of building these global companies. So the first business that we founded in 2007, it was a global AI platform. It was around consumer behaviour modelling whole populations of consumers and their response to different policies and products. A really interesting space. We worked globally in a whole range of different countries, including the US and Europe, and had offices out of Silicon Valley and Australia, always headquartered in Australia. And then we eventually were acquired in 2015 by Ernst & Young, and that gave us the means to be able to continue on the path which we're on now, which is combining kind of my two passions, which is technology and healthcare. So Presagen's was founded at the end of 2016, actually, but we kicked off officially in 2017. And we're a global AI healthcare company with a vision to create products for the femtech sector to improve women's healthcare using technology and artificial intelligence. And we've got a global cloud platform that allows us to connect with clinics globally to amass the large data sets that you need to build scalable AI products. And then we have a first application called Life Whisperer, which some of you might have heard of, which is using AI to select embryos during the IVF process. So instead of clinicians looking down a microscope and making a visual assessment of embryos, they can use our web-based application, drag and drop embryo images, and within about 15 seconds anywhere in the world, they can get a score or an assessment of those embryos with a likelihood of a pregnancy resulting. So it helps them make better decisions for their patients, reduce the trauma of IVF for patients, and reduce the number of cycles that they need to go through. And it really is it's been a really interesting experience in the healthcare sector, highly regulated, kind of developing globally scalable products in a very data secure and privacy concerned environment, with highly conservative user and partnership group being clinicians. So that's been a really interesting experience, but a great one. And we're now approved in 60% of the world's markets. We're expanding globally. We've got users now in 5 countries. And yeah, it's really scaling quickly, and we're kind of getting to the Series A capital raise now to expand our global operations. So that's a little bit about myself and my journey, and I'm keen to hear any questions from the alumni group after we finish the intros.
Thank you, Michelle. David, can you tell us a bit about your background and your fund?
Sure thing. Fun to be back near the campus again. I am a proud Adelaide Uni 2005 graduate. I studied finance and engineering, which was a recommendation to me to get into the e-commerce world, to understand both the technology and the business behind it. After uni, I did leave Adelaide. I'm sorry to say, some job opportunity took me to Sydney in finance and consulting, but soon afterwards to California as an IT geek. The opportunity to go to California is something that I had to do once, and I had 5 years over there doing firstly an apprenticeship of sorts in venture capital, and then staying for an MBA at a US school, which was a lot of fun too. At the end of that, Uber was looking to expand into Australia, and I figured that was a pretty good project to go home and work on. I'd been a student that couldn't afford a ride home, and all sorts of bad decisions were made. So I knew that this was a product that could make cities work a lot better. So I worked on that launch for Australia, starting from Sydney and then expanding across Australia. Similar but distinct to the femtech world, highly regulated, and so we had our fair share of challenges introducing a new way of doing things. But happy to say we prevailed, and I learned a lot along the way about marketing to consumers, and also government and public affairs. At the end of all that, I'm back home now. Got a few kids, and very ready to bring them up in Adelaide and send them to the same schools and universities that I went to. And have a job now with the SA government. They have a fund, $50 million venture capital fund for investing in startups. It was born about 3 years ago, part of many initiatives of government to sort of endorse and promote startups and entrepreneurship. There's facilities like Lot 14. We've got a chief entrepreneur now, Jim Wally, many other initiatives. And one of them was this venture capital fund. The theory was that there's lots of great ideas, but sometimes they don't have the money to take their product or to build their product and take it to market. So we're one piece in that puzzle. The right time to call the SA government fund, the SA venture capital fund, is when you've got an idea. It's not just an idea, but you've built your prototype. You've got a few customers that can say, yep, I like this, and you're ready to expand. You're ready to take on the nation or the world, and we'll have a conversation. It is an investment. It's not a grant. The SA government does have grants. There's accelerators and incubators out there. This fund it makes an investment, and hopefully if it goes well, then all of South Australia shares in the success, and maybe we can invest in the next generation.
Thank you, David. Welcome home. And Grant, you're an engineer at heart who has successfully grown a group of companies nationally and offshore. Can you tell us about your journey growing into a successful entrepreneur and the main challenges you faced in a changing economy and the manufacturing sector over the years?
Well, this is manufacturing, so I could talk for, and the challenges, so we could talk for a few hours. But I guess I'm totally different from the other esteemed colleagues talking tonight. My background, as you said, is along the engineering pathway. I'm a fitter and turner, or fitter and machinist by trade. I actually wanted to become a pilot like my father, a military pilot, but he was a tool maker in his own business here in Adelaide. And he said in his German accent, "No, you will join me in the family business." And so I became an apprentice mold maker, and then started my journey down the path of manufacturing. So unfortunately, about 3 months, this is the abridged version, about 3 months after I finished my apprenticeship, he passed away. That was back in 1982. And yeah, so I basically had a small business with my brother and had to had to decide very quickly whether to continue on or shut up shop. And obviously the decision was made to continue on, and been growing the business ever since. So I guess the main challenges would be in terms of, you know, we were very reliant on automotive engineering, probably from when I started all the way through to about 2004. Automotive, I guess, is my background. Building molds and dies to manufacture cars is my background. So any component on a car we would have tooled, whether it's plastic or cast metal or stampings. But around about 2004, we you know, we saw, because I'd already been to Detroit at least 40 times by that stage for work, and it was pretty clear that you know, automotive was in decline, not only in Detroit but also in Australia. And so I came back and said to my brother, look, you know, we're 90-something% automotive focused. We've got to move away from that. And the 4-year plan was to get down to less than 50%, and also diversify away from just being a mold and die focused business. And so by 2008, you know, we were about 36% automotive. So we'd achieved that aim, but we'd also started another business, and we'd actually bought a couple of other businesses as well to help us get away from that dependency on automotive. So one of the things we did was move away to precision machining. So we had mold and die as well as precision machining. And then we also got involved with automation. And recently we've started, 6 years ago, we started a fabrication business. And the overall plan was to be able to generate or design up an advanced manufacturing group that were complementary, that were all sister companies. I mean, I'm the owner. That's the common link. We operate independently, but collectively we can pretty much design and manufacture anything. And that's been a pretty powerful thing, to diversify away from automotive, but also to have a full suite complement of you know, tools in our arsenal to build pretty much anything. So yeah, pretty much that's been the journey. I mean, it's an ongoing journey. Our business is currently going for AS 9100, which is the aerospace standard. We see, you know, obviously for our industry, massive opportunities in defence, but you know, I don't want to go back to where we were back in 2004 and simply replace automotive with defence. So we're working very hard to ensure that we're, you know, diversified across a range of industry sectors, and we're building, you know, defence in depth, you know, in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. I'll just open the Q&A session with a general question of my own for all of you to comment on, drawing from your own experiences, of course. What would you say your thoughts be on the level of support, I guess, for business growth, innovation and entrepreneurship in South Australia? Why would someone set up shop in South Australia? What's special about building a business here?
Can I just start off?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I mean, we've noticed, because I've worked side by side with members from each university, and I've worked pretty heavily in with government, and Aisha, as you know, we know each other through medical device partnering program. if I take a snapshot 5 years ago to today, I think there's considerably more engagement across industry. I'm talking from an industry's perspective, and universities and government, in terms of the innovation space. So if I was, from our company and our group of companies, because we commercialise our own products now, we've lent very heavily on the government in terms of the grant space, in terms of what's out there for innovation and entrepreneurs to assist us, and we are pushing our customers, some of which are just single inventors or one-man startup companies, into the universities for assistance and other government things. So, and that seems significantly easier, having been at that coalface for a long time for me, than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, perhaps I can make a comment there. I would echo the sentiments of Grant. When I first started my other company in 2007, we were literally housed in the first, let's call it incubator in Adelaide, the first ever one. It was called the Tomorrow Studio. And it was actually a government initiative to try and encourage innovation, and think how far we've come since that particular point. That was a really small collective of companies. There was no government grants really for commercialisation. There was not much engagement across industry, academia, and government as a collective. And I think what's happened now is there's are highly engaged. We've kind of got different parts of the ecosystem working a little bit more synergistically together. There is a lot of engagement across the university and industry sector. There's a lot more commercialisation activity out of universities. There's obviously grant programs that David kind of alluded to through the government, like the ECF, the Early Commercialisation Grant Program, which has now been replaced by the Research Commercialisation Startup Fund, the RCSF Fund, which is its entire purpose is to bridge that gap between early commercialisation and kind of venture-ready companies, which I think is a really great start. So it's encouraging those early stage companies to kind of gain the support that they need to get to a commercial ready stage. And then of course things like the SAVCF, which can then fund that later stage or venture capital ready type approach. So I think there are a lot of different initiatives and a lot of support for entrepreneurs, a lot of engagement from industries and previous alum that have done this before from South Australia. And although we're still somewhat immature, I think, in terms of an ecosystem, I think it's definitely developed significantly over the past 10 years. And that's super exciting because it means that, you know, as we get those kind of successes culminate, then similar to what happened in Sydney and Melbourne and other places around the world, once you get some of those really big global successes, they come back and they further build that ecosystem. But I think all the component parts are there now, and it's really,
I agree.
Exciting.
I'll just add one observation from sort of comparing and contrasting different cities. You know, Adelaide's not the biggest city in the world with the biggest resources, but that isn't always what you want for innovation. The emphasis, the progress that we've seen in the government support of this universe is bipartisan. It's been supported by both sides of Parliament, and if we're in a bigger city, you wouldn't get noticed. And sometimes the smaller cities, when they see an opportunity, whether it's space or something, they can move fast and take action where a bigger city might not. So I think that's you don't want to be in the biggest city or the smallest city in the world if you're in the innovation game. I think Adelaide's got a good mix, enough resources. Like it's big enough to have some great universities, but still small enough that you can find somebody when you need to.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Thank you. We've received a number of questions pre-registered before the event, so I think you might be able to comment on more than one of them, all of you. So I'll just read them out to you. SA may not be viewed as a traditional innovation centre like perhaps Sydney or Melbourne. How do we outperform them? Is something for you, David?
Yeah, I guess that's the point I was trying to make. Yeah, a city like Sydney or Melbourne. Look, there's some practical realities, which San Francisco is facing as well, which is, expensive cities are tough places to be a startup. And this has become very, very apparent in the last 6 months when employees have been told they can work anywhere they like, and many of them are fleeing from expensive cities. So Sydney, a place like San Francisco, if you're a great graduate engineer, good place to earn yourself a lot of money. But if the competition for talent is too fierce for startups offering some equity and the hope of a great outcome to compete against the Facebook, Googles, Amazons, etc. So Sydney and Melbourne face that to some extent as well. Yeah, staff are now as flexible as ever. I know, at least in Michelle's case, she's got a team all around the world. So that's an opportunity. It's also your threat. You're competing against the whole world now more than ever. But for a university and for its graduates, make sure you're tapping into your networks around the whole world.
This is going to be a bit of an altruistic comment from my experience, but we don't have much industry in South Australia. So we don't have a lot of corporate HQs. So we're quite different to Sydney and Melbourne. And I really hate kind of comparisons between how do we become more like somewhere else, because I don't think that's the goal, and I don't think that's the best approach. I think we've got a really sophisticated talent pool coming out of our universities. We've got a very innovative culture, supportive local government that wants to foster innovation and development of industry that is not necessarily, as David alluded to, as suited to a Sydney or Melbourne, but it's more suited to Adelaide. So it's kind of one of the things that it's forced the state to do, and some of the innovators in this state, and some of the reason why innovations are coming out of this state, is because we're forced to look global, we're forced to look national in terms of the technologies that we're developing, because we don't have a local customer base that's big enough to support most customers and most industries or companies. So I think it's kind of in a sort of strange Israel-esque way. We've been forced to look at global opportunities that we can do remotely from a location like South Australia that doesn't rely on a local customer base or those big kind of HQs of corporates that aren't here. So we've got to find our own groove.
Yeah. Look, I tend to agree with that as well. Our experience has been that, if I look at the polar extreme from our business, which is based in US, like if you're a company in Detroit or a company in Los Angeles servicing the engineering market, the market is so big generally compared to Australia that you can afford to specialize on a very small market segment. As an example, if you were a company designing robotics for assembly, you would pretty much be zeroed in on a particular market segment. Like, let's say, for example, it was I'm just grabbing an idea, toothbrushes, right? You would be very good at doing assembly equipment for mass production of toothbrushes. Whereas in Australia, we have to be very good at the same automation equipment to assemble a defense nose cone or for a missile, to an automotive, to a white goods, to a medical component. And so that diversity gives us strength. It makes us think very in different ways to an American engineer or even a European engineer, because our market is so much special. We have to have a much broader skill set, right? And I think that's the same with, the whole innovation space. I think Australians generally tend to think totally different, outside of the box, compared to, and this is by necessity, right, compared to like an American.
Yes, such a
maybe that's
great
just
point.
my viewpoint, but I think that gives us a lot of strength.
It's very true. Michelle, there's a question that's come in for you. As an AI research student, what things/skills should you focus on to be able to, should one focus on to be able to build an AI-driven startup in South Australia?
Oh, wow, that's a really challenging question.
We'll see you in about an hour.
There's so many different aspects. I think one of the interesting things about, you know, I do a lot of these events around trying to encourage students into STEM, trying to encourage more people into kind of coding skills and base level sort of technology skills. But actually one of the really interesting things about my business and AI companies in general is that they're very multidisciplinary. So not only do you need to have the skill sets to actually build the AI, that's actually a reasonably limited amount of skill so not a limited amount of skill in and of itself, but it's only one part of what constitutes a successful company. So for my business, for example, you know, we have to have regulatory experts, we have to have cybersecurity and data related assets. We have to have people who are solid in the software engineering skills, not necessarily anything to do with AI. And then we have the AI engineers, which constitute the research component. And then we have the medical kind of side, medical science side, that look at how you're actually going to orient that AI to solve a clinical problem. So it's quite challenging. And I think my advice, if you're looking to, you know, start an AI startup, is to really, I guess, talk to a lot of people in the space, try and get some experience within a company that is similar or of interest to you so that you can understand how that process looks like, and start developing your ideas with others that might be those kind of peripheral contextual partners within that journey, which is sometimes challenging. So with the University of Adelaide, we do a lot of internship programs. Actually, we've got an advert out at the moment for an intern, so if anyone's interested, let me know. But we do really value kind of those internship programs, and I think the interns get a lot of value out of understanding and seeing how these companies operate on a day-to-day. And the other thing that I would say is it's very different to a science kind of research position, which people often don't realise. So I always use this saying with my team: we're not solving the science, we're solving the problem with the science. So it's very different. It's not exploratory in and of itself. It's trying to tackle a particular application area and using science to do that. So it's just about gaining experience in those different environments, I think, is really helpful.
And a big mind shift at the same time. Yeah. David, with your program at the moment, or your fund, are there very specific focus areas or desired outcomes overall with your venture capital fund?
Well, the desired outcome is to help South Australia. What's distinctive about the fund is it can only invest in South Australian companies.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a niche by global standards, and therefore we can't be too picky. So we're interested in anything that's happening in South Australia. That said, knowing that we want to invest in startups that aren't just good for SA, but that can try and compete globally, I do ask myself the question: what are we world class at? And you know, studying recent history of the state, that leads your attention to, you know, rich history in agriculture, which might turn into ag tech. There's clearly been a lot of attention around space thanks to the space agency. We are seeing folks relocate to Adelaide for that, which is great news. Clearly the defence sector is enormous, and related to that is cyber. That seems to be something that is a hub in South Australia. What else? There's a big medical research capability in South Australia, so it's impossible to ignore what's going on over there. And renewable energy has been something South Australia is famous for. I think renewable energy is now out there. The question is, how does the grid cope with it? How do we transform sort of our network to work with it? So they're starting points, but by no means are we exclusive. Our focus is South Australia. That's what is.
Okay. So there's another question that came through while you were talking, but I think it relates more to criteria and selection of those that get funded. So what would you say to entrepreneur they need to take into account when engaging with government and with your fund in particular, in terms of requirements and criteria for your fund?
Yeah, I'd say it's as much as possible, the SA government's venture capital fund wants to look and make decisions like any other venture capital fund. And we know that any entrepreneur, any startup that's looking for funding, looking for investment will have options and other venture capital funds that they can pick from, which will be most likely based in state or overseas. So we are, any venture capital fund is trying to make somewhat risky bets within their portfolio. They might make 10, 20 investments, and it's expected that a pretty good number of them won't play out. And if they make any money at all, or just go bankrupt. And so there's a few winners, and so they need to be really big winners in order to pay back all of those other investments. So you're looking for entrepreneurs with a big vision, and that's why it's probably not just a product that you're selling to other South Australians. It's something that you're thinking on a global scale with. And so there's plenty of good businesses that might grow nicely and might make some money for a CEO that aren't necessarily good candidates for venture capital from anybody. So that's the space that we play in, that high risk,
Okay.
potentially high return model where the bank's not going to lend you the money, and so you need some riskier capital.
Aisha, can I just add one comment to David's comments there? I think we've been very successful at leveraging kind of the different stages of funding and different approaches to commercialisation that exists probably prior to the SAVCF fund. So what I would encourage students to do, and I probably should have said this in response to my last question, but David just prompted my memory, is kind of there's a lot of commercialisation programs through the universities. So Adelaide E-Challenge, that's where our co-founder Jonathan, that's where I met him. I was a mentor through that program, and we decided to start up and build the concept around Life Whisperer together. We did the CSIRO on Prime challenge, which is all about how to build a business plan and kind of think through those early genesis of business ideas and commercialisation. And then from that, we did the early government commercialisation fund grant program, which was kind of the next stage of, developing that concept into something that was a proof of concept. And then we, in that process, developed some early partnerships, which we then leveraged the government's research commercialisation startup fund to kind of grow through those partnerships and actually develop real world use cases and actual clinical users. And then I think now, now we're talking to David around the SAVCF kind of venture capital space, which is more for kind of, well, you've got a product now, you've demonstrated it, you've kind of done the early proof of concept, you're ready for some level of scale, and now you need money to facilitate that scale. So I guess I just wanted to put out there that there are a whole range of different avenues for these early kind of stage ideas. And it's, there's an opportunity to leverage those to whatever extent you can prior to getting to that venture capital stage.
Thank you. Grant, one thing that I thought the audience would really benefit from, can you take us through the process of designing a solution for one of your clients before the final design, before manufacturing? How do you understand the problem, step back and deliver?
Wow, that's a big one. I guess the important thing to probably start off with is that, our business, we basically chosen one of our 4 businesses to do that particular facet, which is what we call VPG innovation. It's a business that was started off from scratch about 2012, and that was set up to commercialize an opportunity to build a product to replace a clamp that repaired battle damage on board ships. And so for the last, since 2012 to earlier this year, that particular company only developed that particular product. And earlier this year, I bought my 2 partners out in that business, and we are now developing other products for other people as well as ourselves. So we do commercialize products for ourselves and for other people. So it's an important distinction, not just for other people. All development pathways are the same, and what we've found, I guess what I found over the last 10 years of being in that space, is that things can go off the rail. They always go off the rails if you haven't got a really tight design brief, whether it's internal or external. So that's absolutely paramount to make sure that you're talking with the inventor or the person that comes up with the concept with exactly what he or she is after from the process, and that's absolutely number one. So we've had many, I guess, when we started off the process, it was very vague, and we've got this idea and we think this is what the market is, and very quickly we found out that we were on a bit of a hiding to nowhere. Projects took a lot longer and cost a lot more money. So very important to bed that all down. So I guess from there, we're basically, because we've got a full suite of tools under one roof, we can do the industrial designing, we can do the prototyping. Doesn't matter now whether it's 3D printing or whether it's laser cutting or machining or molding or fabricating. We can pretty much build something up pretty quickly and then test that concept or give it to the inventor or the customer for them to review it. And then you're starting through an iterative process to finally develop or get closer to the final design. So each step along the way, you're testing it. Always, I guess, bouncing back to okay, what sort of cost do we have to achieve? Is like internally, I can tell you that we've always got the mind on what the customer at the end of the day is prepared to pay, or what we think they're prepared to pay, and ensuring that at all times we're trying to engineer that product to be manufactured for 1/4 at the most the cost of what the final sale price is. So there's that constant design, iterative process, prototyping process, but always keeping an eye what the cost is. So many people keep on that design process, even our inventors, our customers, continually refining it and building cost into it when it doesn't require it, particularly to get off the ground. So I guess my advice to anybody getting into the design process is make sure that you've got a really firm idea, a set of a good design brief to start off with.
Do you find particular differences between sort of the defence sector versus medical? Do you find distinctive?
No, not really. We've got a full range of clients. We've got clients that are incredibly fastidious and incredibly document orientated. And then we've got clients that, have got this idea on the back of a pasty bag sketch. And they could be I won't mention any names in defence, get me in trouble, but, you've got companies, senior defence people that come to you with a back of a pasty bag sketch or a back of a cigarette packet. Look, what do you reckon about this? I reckon this has got legs. We could change the way that we do, mine sweeping, or the way that we do, aerial surveillance, and we have to take that idea and convert it into something. So, and the whole gamut in between, but there's a full, different, and then you've got me with my own business coming up and telling our guys, hey, we need a product in 2 weeks. We want to get into the COVID-19 space. You've got 2 weeks to come up with a product and launch it. You've got that end of it as well, where, the CEO owner, AKA myself, has got this, plan, and I want to get something into a market quickly. So you've got the full range, really.
Yeah. Thank you. A question for David. Someone heard SAVC fund has 50 million capital for startup, like you said. Who or what supplies this capital and for what purpose? And what are, in terms of scale, what are the comparative advantages in South Australia?
Well, there's I have an update. There's only 40 million left, so that's bad news. But we are keen to make those investments. That money's mostly from the government. So it was an initiative that's about 3 years old, and they've asked Artesian, to help them pick and choose those investments. And so you'll also receive some money from Artesian as part of those investments. But yeah, our focus is on SA. You know, if anything, that's our point of difference, and that's what you're going to get from working with us is something you can go meet down to Lot 14 or in your office.
And what's the time frame on your fund, David? Over how many years is it allocated?
Principally 7 years, and we're halfway through that journey. That's the starting point.
Yeah, and do you have a limit per startup?
A little bit. There's some limits on how much in any one company and how much in any one sector. The government doesn't want to place too many eggs in one basket. But if everything goes to plan, people will see startups, you know, receiving funding, going on to even greater heights. You know, there's a next chapter in the funding game that, you know, ultimately ends in IPOs or acquisitions. Hopefully, we start to see a few of those success stories, and you know, the government might not need to do this again. We might see, you know, local investors starting up their own funds to invest in South Australian startups, and it starts to recycle those success stories. Yeah.
Okay. And I've got one more question for you, Michelle. In your experience, I guess, trying to do commercialisation, innovation in the medtech sector, what can you say to us about a startup in the medtech sector that you've learned that would be significantly different to other startups?
Would it be wrong to say don't do it? No, it's actually a really interesting sector, and it's a big emerging sector, and it's one of the ones globally that's, I guess, set to see the most disruption from technology. It's kind of healthcare costs globally are unsustainable. There's, you know, emerging healthcare needs, global aging population with increasing healthcare needs, diminishing workforces. There's a whole range of reasons why the healthcare sector is actually a really lucrative sector for technology development. What I would say is that there's a lot of core considerations in the healthcare sector, including highly regulated markets. So every global, depending on what you're developing, right? For our medical device, we're anywhere from a class 1 to a class 2 medical device in different global locations. Each of those have a completely different regulatory pathway, which is quite difficult. There's data compliance issues. You can't share private health data across different country borders. So we've had to orient our entire platform and tech to be able to manage that. And it's actually created a wealth of IP for our company that's really valuable now. But, you know, we've had to get data certifications like ISO 13485 and HIPAA compliance and GDPR compliance in Europe. And it's not for the faint-hearted. There's a lot of considerations, and they're not cheap businesses to run and grow, particularly at global scale. Yeah. So I guess it's really important to know those things, because if you are looking at if you've got a set of options as to how you want to orient your technology, or are you thinking about your commercialization plan, it's really good to have that long-term view about what you'll need to actually get the product to market, and whether there's a kind of less burdensome pathway initially, and kind of iteratively develop the, you know, future product that you have in your vision over time as you kind of scale that initial version or iteration or orientation of the product. So I think, yeah, we've kind of done that in a way with Life Whisperer. We've tried to tackle markets where we're a class 1 medical device and the regulatory approvals is not so much of a hurdle, but we've always tried to meet our product specification to the highest level of regulation that's going to be required. It's just that it takes time. So if you need to generate revenue, it's a difficult approach.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I've got a very specific questions from someone else. I'm not sure anyone can comment if you've got an answer. If you wanted to manufacture lithium-ion battery components in SA to get a lot more value add back in Australia, where would you start?
Lithium ion. Okay, well, I guess we are mining it, I would say, at some point in Australia, and we're simply just exporting it now, not adding value to it. So I guess the question is, how can we add value back in country? Yeah. So I think, that's driven commercially from a couple of different ways. Either we need the batteries that we are going to develop and then on-sell the batteries offshore and locally, or we're developing an electric vehicle market and facility here in Australia. So either of those will develop a market, and that's quite often the precursor, having a market before you actually have the product, and then force yourself. You set up a commercial opportunity in that regard. Yeah, I know there's quite a bit of work that's being done at the moment in the electrical space, in the electric car space. Yep. That will ramp up, as countries legislate away from combustion engines or internal combustion engines driven by hydrocarbon. That's obviously underway in a lot of countries in Europe, and certainly that will follow pace here in Australia. But look, I know that there is significant investment starting off in electrically powered vehicles in Australia, the manufacture thereof. And right now, that will mean that the resource in terms of batteries will come in from offshore. It'll just take one smart entrepreneur to put two and two together and fund some sort of development in that area. So I think it's always going to be a commercial thing that drives it. And I think that point is coming a lot quicker than you or I think.
Thank you. Just looking at the time, do you have something to add, David?
I've just got an even better idea. If anybody can, if any of the researchers or scientists can come up with a superior battery chemistry, then you'll really change the world. Lithium-ion batteries are common, but the improvements year on year are very minimal. And it's certainly holding back, what your phone can do and how far your car can go. So there's a lot of smart minds working on this, but if anybody cracks it, they'll change the world.
That's right. I've got a final general question for all of you. In your opinion, what are the possible opportunities that will present themselves to young entrepreneurs in South Australia in the next decade?
I think I'll take this one first and make it quick, but there's an emerging deep tech sector in South Australia. There's no doubt about it. I think we've got a lot of national capability around medtech, space, cyber, other technology, advanced manufacturing, other kind of technology orientations. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. And in fact, I think next week it is that the government's launching its high-tech sector plan, which very much talks about those different sector focuses. So I think there's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs and anyone working within those sectors.
I think, David, can I just jump in? Yeah. I think, I've been in the industry quite a while. I'm 58. I probably not, I can't remember the last time I felt so excited to actually be in the industry. There's a lot of things happening at the moment, which I think we in South Australia, or in Australia for that matter, can be pretty buoyed up about, pretty excited, because, there's a lot of new technologies happening. There's a defence sector that's going to be booming. Renewables is quite strong in Australia and world leading. Michelle's talked about the Medtech sector and the growth that we're experiencing in that, and some ground-changing things and opportunities. But look, if I was young and starting off as an entrepreneur, this would be an incredible period in time. I think the next 10 years, there's going to be some massive opportunities because it's now so connected globally to be able to get products out there and sell them anywhere in the world, right from here. That's my 10 cents worth.
That's the right. If I was thinking 10 years out, I'd be asking myself, what do I think is going to go wrong? What are the problems? And then there are opportunities for entrepreneurs. And just two that come to mind when you start taking a longer term horizon. One is in the food world. We're obviously seeing the early building blocks of alternatives to meat. That's only going to become, I think, a more pressing issue over time. And I think, I know Adelaide has great research in that space. So hopefully there's some students and young grads who can go after that. The other problem is clearly that we're at cyber war today, and I think it's only going to grow. So that's just an enormous opportunity in the world, and one that this state has got a big part to play.
Yeah.
Thank you. Time flies when you're having a really good discussion. So I wanted to thank you, all of you, for your time today. And I think the audience has gotten a lot out of your contribution today. So thank you for your time in making Ingenuity a special event this year. Thank you.
Something different.
No worries. Get out and get up and invent things and make things.
Yeah. If you haven't already, have a look at the virtual event. It's still going to be online for about a month. So go in and out of the booths. There's some fantastic work being done by our students. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.